So we now move on to item 5, which is West Lancashire Borough application number LCC 2021-0027. This relates to the construction of a new access track to provide safe access to water area, East Quarry, Apley Lane North, Apley Bridge, Wigan. Jonathan Hain is our officer. I'd ask him to present. I also just note that Andy Mullaney, who's our head of planning and environment, would usually be with us in person, is with us virtually because he's isolating. So thoughts are with him at this time. So Jonathan, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is an application for a new access ramp at East Quarry to be constructed using imported inert materials. So I just go to the first slide. So,
sorry, just Jonathan, give me a second. Councillor Pope, can I help?
Yeah, I'd just like to question this. Clearly, I'm sure people have seen that there has been an issue with regard to whether this should be heard by West Lancs Borough Council or by LCC. The application is actually for construction of a new access track to provide safe access to the water.
Recording in progress.
That isn't anything to do with mineral or waste activity. So I'd just like some clarification as to why LCC are looking at this and why it hasn't gone to the Borough Council, because the Borough Council Planning Department and the Planning Committee has not seen this application yet.
Thank you, Councillor Pope. Jonathan, perhaps you could address that issue immediately in your remarks.
I'm happy to step in, Chair.
Ross, thank you.
Councillor Pope, have you seen the update sheet? Okay, well, I mean, the council's position is as set out there. Essentially, a screening application has been made for this site. There was a discussion with West Lancs Borough Council as to whether they would be the proper determining authority or whether we would. We were both agreed that we would be the proper determining authority, and then in any event, section 286 of the Town and Country Planning Act sets out that no proceedings could be brought regardless of which planning authority took that decision. So essentially the council's position is it's a non-point.
But okay, just a further point regarding this. Clearly there was a consultation period with regard to this, and yet a report was produced and a decision put on that report before the consultation period was even up. So the West Lancs Borough Council Planning Department hadn't had the opportunity to actually put their points of view before you made the decision on your paper. Now, clearly a report has been issued afterwards by West Lancs Borough Council, but you haven't made that fully available to all the members.
You address that, please, as well? No.
Sure, yeah. So no decision's been taken. That's what committee are meeting for today, to take a decision on this proposal. In terms of the statutory consultation, the consultation was carried out. West Lancashire Borough Council didn't respond formally within that time and have since submitted comments. I think was it this week, Jonathan? This week. So I mean, the statutory consultation period has been run, and a decision hadn't been taken before that statutory consultation had expired.
Are you happy to? Well, what I suggest, Councillor Pope, is we have obviously Jonathan to present this, and then a dozen different speakers on this, and we can have a full debate and cover this off again, if that'd be all right. Thank you, Jonathan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this first slide shows the location of East Quarry, which is in the village of Apley Bridge. Apologies, I can't make the pointer work, so you have to follow the cursor, which I hope you can see there. So East Quarry is the area of water there in the centre of Apley Bridge, which is in West Lancashire. You can see the M6 there to the east. And the next slide shows a bit more. I can make it work. A bit more detail. So this slide shows a bit more detail of the site. So East Quarry is a former sandstone quarry that was last worked in the late 1980s and has since partially filled with water. Apley Lane North, which is the road to the west there, is the main road that runs through the centre of Apley village. The other points to make on the slide, and there's a industrial complex here called Northern Diver, which is one of the main occupiers of that industrial area. Apley Bridge Railway Station is to the south. And just to point out various locations which are named in the report and in the comments which have been received. And there's an area of land here to the west of Apley Lane North, which is called West Quarry, which is the former landfill site that was landfilled in the 1980s, which has now been restored. Apley Lane North, as I said, runs north-south through Apley Village here, and that links with Skullhouse Lane, which is, I'll turn around and point out the views. Skullhouse Lane is not working. And Skullhouse Lane is the road that links Shevington Vale with Apley Lane North, and then there's Back Lane here, which runs to the junction on the M6. You can see here the site does have some houses around it. There's Stone Mill Rise here to the south, where houses overlook the quarry. There's also some houses on Ashfield Terrace to the north here, and they are in part of a conservation area. So this is an air photograph of the site taken, I think, 2 years ago. As you can see from this slide, East Quarry now contains a considerable volume of water. So during periods of good weather in the summer, the site attracts much authorised use by people who come to swim and dive in the quarry. Unfortunately, this has resulted in a number of accidents, including 2 fatal drownings. And to address this problem, the landowner proposes to pump the water out of the quarry to reduce its attractiveness, but unauthorised use. He has obtained an abstraction licence from the Environment Agency for this purpose, with the water being discharged to the Calico Brook, which is to the east of the quarry through that area of woodland there. The applicant's reasons for the new access ramp are twofold. Firstly, to undertake the pumping works, he will need staff to go into the base of the quarry to operate and maintain the pumps. There is an existing access ramp into the base of the quarry, but the applicant states this is very steep and narrow and has a 90-degree bend located close above the water and the cliff face. So the access ramp is located in that area there. The pointer's not working, so yeah, so it's located to the north, or just to the south of the Northern Diver complex there. So the 90-degree bend is in that location there, where the track turns around above the water and above the cliff face, above the water. So this access route, the applicant is saying, is unsuitable in terms of his obligations under the Health and Safety at Work Act. And secondly, the abstraction licence requires that the water level in the quarry shall not be less than 10 metres above the base of the quarry. So therefore, even after pumping operations, there will be water in the base of the quarry, which may be attracted to unauthorised use. You will see from the report that there are various responses from the emergency services which confirm the need for good access in the event there is need to perform a rescue. So this slide is a slide of the applicant's proposal showing the ramp location. So the ramp is the area in purple there. The applicant's already constructed a concrete hard standing to the north, and that's to be used to allow HGVs to enter the site and tip without passing over unsurfaced roads, and therefore avoid problems of mud and dust being tracked out onto Apley Lane North. So this is Apley Lane North here, running north-south through the slide, and the blue line there shows the boundary of the current water within the quarry itself. So the cross sections on the right, they show the proposed ramp area. So you can see there the black line showing the current configuration of the quarry face, with a brown shaded area showing the ramp, which will be constructed using imported inert materials. So this next slide shows a view across the quarry from the current access. So you can see there in the background there's the water within the quarry, which is a substantial area of water of considerable depth. And this is the fencing which currently surrounds part of the quarry on its public access frontages. There are other parts of the site that aren't fenced, but they're ones which are backed by private development. So this next view is a view from the new concrete area that the applicants recently constructed. So this is a view looking down the area where the ramp will be constructed. So the ramp would come down across the bare area here and through the trees in the background. And so some of those trees would need to be removed to construct the ramp. Okay, so this slide here shows the concrete ramp, or the concrete area the applicants recently constructed. So you can see there that is backed by a security fence, which is designed to try and to prevent unauthorized access to the quarry itself. So these next slides show a view of the highway issues and the access, given that's one of the main issues which are being raised by representations to this application. So this view here shows the view from Apley Lane North into the quarry itself. So the quarry is located behind the fencing in this area here. And these next views show views up Apley Lane North. The important point to make here is that these photographs were taken at the start of July on a Thursday morning at around lunchtime. And during normal conditions, pre-pandemic, this road was subject to considerable on-street parking because people park at Apley Bridge railway station and they use then to get the train into Manchester and Liverpool and other locations. So normally there is a lot of on-street parking along this road. So these two views here, whilst they represent the road conditions at the time of the photographs taken, they're not strictly representative of how the road is during normal conditions. So this is the view looking south towards Apley Bridge railway station. So again, you can see on this side of the road, there's no parking lines, and on the east side, there is some on-street parking, which has the effect of narrowing the carriageway, and that's one of the issues raised by local residents in their representations in terms of the suitability of Apley Lane North to accommodate the number of HGVs which will be generated from this development. The highway impacts and representations are noted, but it is considered that they will be acceptable given that this is a temporary operation with a relatively short timescale. There is no objection from the highways, from LCC highways, in terms of highway safety or capacity. If I can now turn to the update sheet, which you can see, well, there's on two update sheets. There's one that was prepared at lunchtime yesterday, and then a further addendum that was prepared last evening at about 6 o'clock to include some further comments that were received after the first one was prepared. So if I can turn now to the first update sheet, so you'll see there there's some further consultations that have been received from West Lancashire Borough Council, from the Environment Agency, and also from Shevington Parish Council. So firstly, West Lancashire Borough Council object to the application for 3 reasons. Firstly, they consider that insufficient information has been submitted to fully assess the impacts of noise from construction activities, which is in conflict with the MPPF and the local plan policies. They also consider that insufficient information has been submitted to fully assess the impacts on ecology, contrary to the habitats regulations, national planning policy framework, and also the policies of their local plan. And thirdly, they consider insufficient information has been submitted to fully assess the impact on woodland within the site, again contrary to the MPPF and their local plan policies. The Environment Agency raised no objection, but they do state that their abstraction licence, which they've issued, allows for the partial dewatering of the quarry, but a volume of water will be retained within the void, and as a result of the change in water level, alternative access arrangements may be required to allow for emergency access. The EA also comment that the development may require a permit or an exemption from permitting, which is a matter I'll come on to later on. And finally, Shevington Parish Council, they requested that the application is deferred to allow more time to allow them to provide comments. They consider that it's inappropriate for the report to be prepared until objectors have been given full time to submit their views. The Parish Council also questioned why they and Wigan Council were not formally consulted on the application. So next on the update sheet, you can see I've summarised there a further 106 recommendations that we received since the report was prepared, and 3 further letters of support. I don't intend to go through all of those now because they are mainly dealt with in the report, but hopefully you've been able to read the update sheet and you'll be able to see what the comments which have been made. But there are 7 issues which I'd like to comment in detail, which I've set out in detail in the update sheet. So firstly, on page 3 of the update sheet, at point 1, one issue that's been raised is in terms of the scope of the development. So many of the comments which have been raised are on the basis that the application is for landfilling of the entire quarry. However, it is important to say that the application is only for the construction of an access ramp and not for the landfilling of the whole site, which would be an altogether different development with significantly greater impacts. And I would urge the members to determine the application on the basis of the ramp and not the landfilling of the entire quarry. Secondly, the issue has been raised in terms of the need to continue the ramp further into the quarry. I'll just go back to a slide just to illustrate the point that's being made here. So what local residents are concerned about is on the left-hand plan. You can see the purple area there is the proposed ramp that's the subject of this application. And the blue line there is the water line. And there's a note here on this plan which says that the access track may need to be extended as the water level is lowered. And the point which is being made by residents and others is that as the water level is lowered, there may be cliff faces or other voids which will need to be infilled to allow access to under the water as it's lowered, and therefore the ramp is only the first stage of a much larger scheme of infilling. That may well be the case, but I will come back to the point that what we're dealing with now is only for the ramp, and it's within the area edge red, which is the purple area. On the slide. So issues in relation to what happens below the water level at this stage aren't really relevant to the current application. So thirdly, the capacity of the vehicles. So the point being made here is that the applicant has based the total number of HGVs on the basis of each HGV carrying 9 meters cubed of fill material, which gives a total number of HGVs 1,222. So what residents are saying is that if the capacity is less, and they're saying that most tipper HGVs carry a volume of 8 cubic meters, then the number of HGVs required to import materials for the ramp will increase to 1,373, which is an additional 153 vehicles. And then that may well be the case. However, it is not considered that this would materially change the impacts on highway safety and capacity, although it would result in a small extension in the duration of the development with some additional impact on local amenity. The carrying capacity of an HGV is based upon tonnage, so the volume in each vehicle depends on the density of the material, not in terms of its actual volume. The fourth point is in relation to flooding, and the point being made by some residents is that the pumping of the quarry will result in flooding problems in the receiving watercourse, but the abstraction lines which have been issued by the Environment Agency contains conditions which require the pumping to cease if rainfall events reach certain trigger levels. This is to prevent flooding in the watercourse, and in any event, this is the issue controlled by other legislation and is not relevant to the current planning application. The fifth point is in relation to the use of the waste material. The applicant has registered an exemption with the Environment Agency to allow the use of waste materials for the ramp construction. This means that the ramp can be constructed without having to apply for a full environmental permit. The exemption system is there to allow relatively small amounts of clean waste material to be used for construction purposes. And again, once again, this is the point that's covered by other legislation, is not directly relevant to the planning application. The sixth issue relates to vehicle numbers, and comparison has been made with other recent planning permissions which have been granted on the adjacent West Quarry site, and that the vehicle numbers proposed for the ramp are much higher than the levels that have been previously found acceptable. However, the cases which have been quoted are not comparable, as they were either for permanent developments or related to short-term construction operations, where the HGV restrictions within the permissions reflected what the applicant applied for and did not represent maximum acceptable levels. The seventh and final issue is in terms of the determining planning authority, which is the issue that my colleague Ross Hudson replied to earlier on. But the County Council's position is that LCC has jurisdiction to determine this application. Given the nature of the development, this issue was discussed with the Borough Council prior to the application being submitted, and the Borough Council was content for the application to be submitted to LCC. The ramp would use waste materials in its construction and is within a former quarry site, which has been subject to a recent County Council screening opinion in relation to a landfill proposal. And moreover, section 286 of the Town Planning Act states that the invalidity of any permission issued by a local planning authority in respect of an application for planning permission shall not be called into question in any legal proceedings on the ground that the permission should have been granted, made or given by some other local planning authority. So therefore, we do think that there is a part of the Planning Act that applies in these cases where there is a slightly grey area in terms of who's the relevant determining authority. So therefore, our advice on that is that the advice provided to the councillors Bailey, Phillis and Dukes fails to refer to this important section of the Act. Officers' advice is that it is incorrect to conclude any decision by the County Council will be ultra vires and could be challenged and potentially quashed on this basis. Finally, I'd like to refer to the Borough Council comments. In relation to comments from the Borough Council, the construction of the ramp would require the use of a dozer to level the tip materials to form the ramp. Given the level of plant activity and the duration of the works, which is only 5 weeks, it is not considered that a full noise assessment is required. Noise impacts can be addressed by planning conditions. I refer you to conditions 7 and 9 in the report. The issues in relation to ecology are also addressed in the report. So just to conclude, this proposal is required so that the landowner can address some of the issues of public safety and local amenity in the area. It would have some environmental impact, particularly from HGV traffic and impact on local amenity, but on balance, it is considered that planning permission should be granted subject to the conditions set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Before we turn to councillors and their questions, there are a number of speakers on this item. Just to remind you all that you have a 3-minute limit here. Please do use this up if you wish, but if you feel other speakers have already made the points you're going to make, then you may not wish to repeat them. And please do be specific to planning issues only. You will be given a warning when there's 1 minute left. Ross Hudson will give you that warning. So to the first speaker is Councillor Katie Dukes. Katie.
Thank you, Chair. For the purpose of openness and transparency, I wish to make a declaration of interest that I am in a legal dispute with Maybrook Investments. I am Councillor Dukes and I represent Risington Ward, of which Aptley Bridge is part of the parish. This application, if successful, will impact on Aptley Bridge. Essentially, this is an application to construct a track to a disused quarry. The professional planning advisor has suggested that such a proposal is not a county matter as prescribed under the 2003 County Matters Regulation because it does not fit those criteria. Therefore, this application should have been heard by West Lancs Borough Council. Since we are here, clearly that advice has been ignored. Problems with the quarry divide the community and hear it from both sides. It is now clear to me that this division is a result of false promises and misinformation. This application has brought issues to a head. Residents have brought this leaflet to my attention. It is titled East Quarry Access Ramp, the Facts. and is published by Maybrook Group, you can see here. The leaflet gives selective quotes that appear to be factual. However, this is misleading. Other speakers will have drawn their contradictions to your attention as do some comments from West Lakes Borough Council Planning Department. A good example is where the applicant claims that the ramp work will start tomorrow once the application is granted, so that work can continue in summer holidays to save lives. Many residents believe this. This is not true. The applicant was made aware on the 9th of April 21 by EA that a permit would be necessary. To date, no application has been submitted. I can provide evidence to this. Jonathan, on his update, states that information counters this. We need clarification before a decision is made. Another example is the applicant informs Jonathan that the proposed ramp reaches an existing track. There is no evidence in this application to support this, and that is supported by a resident who worked as a quarryman when it was a working quarry. So further investigation is necessary as requested by West Lakes Borough Council. This application cannot be rushed. A more reasoned approach is necessary where all the facts are available and the truth is told. I accept that the quarry presents a real danger, but that can be resolved by the applicant creating a secure fence around the perimeter whilst further information is gathered. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Next, we have Julian Chambers. Mr. Chambers, where are you? Welcome.
Good morning, councillors, and thank you for the opportunity to speak before yourselves and explain my objection to this application. I've taken the liberty of emailing a presentation to the committee, laying out the most important issues that the residents of Apley Bridge have to this planning application, and I trust you've all had time to read and digest. I wish to challenge this application based on the out-of-date and erroneous data provided by the applicant in relation to the bat habitat assessment, preliminary arboricultural assessment, preliminary ecological appraisal, and survey scoping appraisal. The survey scoping appraisal is compiled from a desk-based study issued in October 2019, and such surveys must be reviewed when they become 18 months old or more, which this is, and as dictated by the Chartered Institute of Ecology and Environmental Management. The only site visit was in September 2019, and only in one small section of the quarry away from where the majority of the wildlife is based. The bat habitat survey is compiled from a desk-bound study, again issued in September 2019, using figures from 2010 and 2011. Such surveys must be reviewed when they become 18 years old or more. The habitat around East Quarry has changed dramatically during the past 11 years, and no up-to-date bat survey has been commissioned or performed physically on the site. The applicant states that there are no bats in East Quarry. However, residents have video evidence around the quarry edge of high numbers of bats inhabiting this area. The building of this ramp and the importation of 11,000 cubic meters of landfill and the destruction of the trees will impact this habitat dramatically. And as you're aware, bats are legally protected species and offered full legal protection under the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981 and the Conservation of Habitats and Species Regulations 2017. And if you refer to the correspondence from Jacobs issued by yourselves to Mr. Hayne, dated the 13th of July 2021, you will note their comment on page 2 that several species of bats are recorded as being present. The preliminary arboricultural assessment, again, this assessment was formed from a desk-based survey issued in September 2019 and is more than 18 months old. The preliminary ecological appraisal is compiled from a desk-based study, again issued in 2019, and again is more than 18 months old. The applicant's own report states that this report is only valid until the 6th of March 2021, after which it must be reviewed, and this has not been done. And it states clearly the applicant's own report that physical surveys relied on their desk survey were done outside of peak season. Residents have photographic proof of great crested newts around the quarry in the past 2 weeks, nesting birds with chicks in the quarry currently, breeding kingfishers, breeding toads, swans and bats. All the species are protected by UK law under the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981 as amended, and from being disturbed or their habitat destroyed or disturbed. Therefore, in conclusion, councillors, to grant this application, knowing that there are legally protected species resident in the quarry, would I feel be a breach of UK law by Lancashire County Council. No planning permission should be granted until a full physical survey has been performed over 2 seasons. Thank you for your time, councillors, and I hope my points have resonated with you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Anne Fletcher. Ms. Fletcher, welcome.
I wish to challenge the photographs on the presentation which show an empty Appley Lane North. I do not recognise these pictures as a typical view of this extremely busy and overused lane. As a resident of Appley Bridge living at the junction of Skullhouse Lane and Appley Lane North, I would like to describe what I witness daily and what this lane is actually like. I see, hear, smell and breathe the huge volume of traffic which goes past my house, and residents on this road suffer the same daily. Residents recently carried out a traffic survey from the top of Appley Lane North. It showed that there are more than 4,000 vehicle movements between the hours of 5 AM and 7 PM. Numbers are vastly inflated between the hours of 7:30 and 9:30 AM and 15:30 and 17:30 PM. The planning officer's report mentions parking issues are due to commuters using the station. It is the parking issue further up the road which will cause the most disturbance and danger. Many villagers park their cars at the side of the road, and vehicles, including HGVs, have to queue while others are pushed out into oncoming traffic. Exiting side roads and drives behind parked cars and high hedges is hazardous, particularly for older drivers. The dangers to pedestrians cannot be underestimated. Cars, work vans and delivery lorries left for long periods at the side of the road take up space on the pavements, which are narrow and uneven along the whole stretch of Appley Lane North. Pedestrians, especially those with prams or the disabled, are frequently forced to step into the road to get past. Crossing the road is difficult and dangerous, particularly during rush hours, which coincide with the school run. Due to lack of parking facilities next to the school, cars park on the road from down by the village hall up to and beyond Finch Lane, which results in small children walking up the main road. It is vital that parking issues are not dismissed. The road is regularly used by groups of recreational cyclists. From the window of my house, I have witnessed several accidents involving cyclists and vehicles at the junction of Skullhouse Lane and Appley Lane North. The application proposals of lorry numbers and timescale do not take into account that there will be empty lorries leaving the site, therefore doubling the numbers on the road to 1 lorry every 6 minutes. 9 hours of tipper trucks will include rush hour and the school run. During these times, there is an increased risk to pedestrians and no extra lorries should run. However, any change in working hours will result in a much extended time frame and the accompanying misery and inconvenience that this will bring to those who live here. Residents of Appley Lane North have long suffered from being sandwiched between West Quarry and East Quarry. In West Quarry, under the same ownership, there are many outstanding issues that remain disputed and unresolved. The residents of this road are subjected to the cumulative loss of amenity from both sides. I therefore ask that you refuse this application because this ramp will not fulfill its purpose. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Next, Roger Alexander. Mr. Alexander, welcome.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Having looked at the supporting information to my objection, you'll see on the front page 2 diagrams, a left diagram and a right diagram. The one on the left was sent to Lancashire County Council and is the one that's on view at the top of the screen now. The very different diagram is the one that was sent on the right-hand side to the Environment Agency in 2019. Why two diagrams? Because the smaller purple track on the left, as seen on the screen, represents an unverified 11,000 cubic meters of infill. The figures provided do not give any chance to verify them. Whereas the one supplied to the Environment Agency in 2019 was part of a 70% dewatering application. A 7% dewatering application was applied for because this requires less scrutiny. There are literally fewer hoops to jump through for the applicant than going for a 100% dewatering situation. He's looking to build a ramp to take infill down into the quarry, which is not a sensible thing with water left in the bottom. That is applying for a 7% dewatering application and has that is another example of this applicant not following government guidelines as recommended and advised by both yourselves and Lancs County Council and the Environment Agency. By providing different information to 2 different agencies, he seeks to divide and rule. The Environment Agency track is more than double the length, double the size of the Lancs County Council you're being asked to adjudicate on today. Compare the width of the track on the diagram with the width of Appley Lane North. This is going to allow 2 HGV vehicles passing. It'll be strong enough for that. It is more, way more than sufficient to allow as suggested, emergency access, one ambulance coming down the track.
1 minute remaining.
Today's incomplete application before you shows less than a half of the total roadway that will be required. This track before you today ends at an 80-degree slope that will leave any vehicle, ambulance or HGV, falling off the edge of a cliff face if it's not completed to the extent of the Environment Agency track. Precedents were set by this committee in 2000 and 2018, only allowing 4 HGV movements per hour along the same route and restricted hours of working to safeguard the amenity of residents. He requires an environmental permit. He was told this in April. He has yet to bother to apply for one. As the emergency services themselves haven't requested or required this track for decision before you today, should the present applicant ever apply for the outstanding permit, then the existing tracks shown in the photographs of the quarry would suffice for HGV movements, not requiring infill, and would therefore bring far less disruption to the residents, schools,
Sorry,
and workers of
Speaker,
Appley Bridge.
you've had 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a dishonest application.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. Next, we have Mark Tamlin via Zoom. Speakers via Zoom request to turn on their video and unmute themselves and then mute after speaking, but you'll also be given a 1-minute warning.
Good morning. I've lived in Dorbadell for 12 years, have extensive views over the East Quarry, and have seen a significant increase in trespassing activity and antisocial behaviour in the past 2 years. The perimeter fence adjoins the cul-de-sac, but the fence does not at all look like the one in Mr. Haynes' report, slide 6. The picture in his presentation is taken near the main entrance on the opposite side of the quarry. It implies that this is typical of the quality of the fence. It isn't. Many parts of the fence are bent, bars removed, and have holes dug under it. Wigan Today, last Friday, the 16th of July, quoted, "Since purchasing the East Quarry site in 2019, Maybrook have at all times complied with their obligation to keep the quarry safe and secure and deter trespassers. This is not true. I have seen no changes to the perimeter fence and have never seen security guards. The perimeter fence has breaches that go unrepaired, and there is a bolted, locked gate to the north, which was left unlocked and wide open, allowing full access. There is another emergency access gate to the northeast. This was breached during the dispersal order of June the 12th, 2021. The resident reported to the police at the time and made temporary repairs. This has not been repaired, and there has been no contact from Maybrook in the intervening weeks. It has been broken and opened again over the weekend, with trespassers accessing the quarry through his garden. Breaches of the fence are left to residents to monitor and report trespass when people run across private gardens. The bars in the fence are levered open and have remained unfixed, allowing for easy access. If the owner met his obligation, trespassers coordinate their approach and collect debris from the surrounding area, which is neither monitored or cleared up by the owners and then used to facilitate access. If the owner met his obligations, he would clear the detritus to facilitate this access. The building of the ramp would potentially increase the number of places for people to gather and would allow for easier access to the water level. There are no lifebuoys, no phone number readily available to report issues or an emergency contact, and no site personnel available on any sunny weekend at East Quarry. Any issues arriving have to be dealt with by residents, the police, and the emergency services. Slide 12 on the presentation is a very emotive picture. It frightens people to think that something has to be done, and it's played to support the ramp. However, it should be used to highlight the need to secure the boundary. If the boundary was secure, this picture would be empty. Please don't be fooled. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tamlin. Next is David Corner. Mr. Corner. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to raise some issues of the last weekend. On Friday, the 16th of July, Maybrook Group posted on Facebook that they had a meeting with police and fire and rescue to ensure that the perimeter was secure, and they advertised that a dispersal order will be in place with additional police presence. They also published a film to discourage children from entering the quarry. However, at 12:15 p.m, children were already swimming in the quarry on the north side and remained unchallenged. At 3:20 p.m, the police flew a drone up and around the quarry. On Saturday, the 17th of July, in the morning, a lot more swimmers arrived. By mid-afternoon, there was lots of activity in the quarry and the agencies had arrived. A resident observed that the quarry's outer perimeter fence had been breached and witnessed 2 men and 2 women with crates of beer waiting to access the quarry as other youths left. In the early evening, about 6:09 p.m, a group of 9 youths were seen climbing over the garden and walls of fences in Dorber Delph. These are 6-foot-high walls topped with high fence panels. At the end of a resident's garden, they damaged an emergency access gate to illegally gain access to the quarry. When questioned by the homeowner, the youths completely were unapologetic for causing any damage or trespass and carried on forcing their way into the quarry. This is persistent and willful disregard to residents' private properties and shows that the youths are determined to access the quarry. At the same time, the police were filming from the other side of the quarry. Having been dispersed from the quarry at 6:25 p.m, youths were causing trouble in the Premier shop and in the field in Newgate Avenue, and this was reported on Facebook, and activity was heard in the quarry until midnight. On Sunday, the 18th of July, around 10:50 a.m, several swimmers were trespassing, seemingly unchallenged, easily getting into the water from the existing rampway, even though they were in such close proximity to Maybrook's office, who purport to carry out regular checks on the security of the quarry. Later in the morning and afternoon, lots more youngsters and some families were seen looking for access to the quarry, and again were challenged by local residents and told about the dispersal order. They responded, "We don't care. You can't do anything to us." Right? This shows a complete disregard for any consequences from the law. Later, at 18:15 p.m, more than 24 children were seen coming through Dorber Delph, a shortcut leading back to the station. A police car at the top of Dorber Delph. The driver sat inside, but there was no activity. Meanwhile, another dozen kids were leaping over private walls, gaining access to the quarry. This has happened whilst the hole in the perimeter fence has remained unrepaired and will continue to allow more youths to access the quarry. On Monday, the 19th of July, the hole in the fence was shoddily repaired with a strip of balustrade held in place with 2 nuts and 2 bolts. Later in that morning, youths got some concrete and smashed open that temporary repair and gained access to the quarry. Right? This happens on a regular basis. This has been reported to Maybrook, right, with requests. There is just an emergency number and an email. There's no emergency number, sorry. There's just an email address. This is not good enough for people to report any problems. I can continue with lots of other examples. This is going to continue carrying on unless this application is rebuked. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Corner. Jane Corner.
Good morning. I'd like to go back to Mr. Haynes's presentation, please, because Apley Bridge is an industrial village, but it's actually built around 3 quarries that supplied stone. Apley Lane North and Schoolhouse Lane are the roads, but they're like threads, and they separate the 3 quarries. We know all about quarrying, landfilling and industrial estates. West Quarry, rightly said, was landfilled in the 1980s. It continues to impact on residents due to the lack of monitoring and management. Dorber Delph Quarry was developed into an industrial estate, which has not been mentioned, and today many vehicles also access Apley Lane North and Schoolhouse Lane. East Quarry was allowed to fill with water. Mr. Haynes shows the map and an aerial photograph in his presentation on slides 3 and 4. 2 of the quarries are not labelled on those maps, each of which generates HGVs and all use the same roads for accesses. The map does not show the pinch points on that lane. It also vitally does not show the village amenities, such as the school or the village hall, which is also used daily for a variety of different groups. The school is where the parents are concerned about dropping off and picking up their children on a bend on a steep hill. They are not shown on your presentation, Mr. Haynes. I quote from the head teacher: "It is our understanding that the proposed development would see an increase in the number of loaded lorries. We feel that we could not impact on this could impact on the safety of our pupils and their families. The size and speed of these vehicles are not conducive to the narrow winding section of Apley Lane North on a bend and on a steep hill." You've heard about the recording of 4,000 vehicle movements already this morning. So what danger will these children and parents be in when there's even more HGVs moving up and down? I appreciate you talked about the summer holidays, but this work will not be finished by the end of that. There have been accidents in this area. There is no overview of this road currently. Mr. Hayne has not articulated how the site will add to the cumulative impact of traffic on the road at the existing sites. Therefore, the plans for the ramp would indicate that it's over-engineered for emergency services, for which the intention of the application. The application as it is, therefore, will increase the number of additional lorries along the road. Therefore, to sum up, I'd like to point out that the map and the aerial view in Mr. Haynes' report does not show the true, full, big picture in the surrounding area of East Quarry, and therefore the cumulative effect which has not been mentioned in this area. Building this track is going to cause a lot more misery and potentially much more danger that is already there on an ordinary day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Sally Edmondson. Sally Edmondson?
That's me, sorry.
Oh, sorry, hello.
So the reason for the track, as we know, is for emergency access and maintenance. But have the emergency services or health and safety executives said they need a ramp? And the simple answer to that is no, they've not. The need for the supporting statements for the application filed under the general section, some of which have been put there by the applicant. Please do not be misled by these quotes of support. In contrast, neither of the two members of the police force who do patrol the area, they have not supported this application. Instead, all they've done is asked further questions, one of which is, can you confirm that there is a process in place to maintain the fence line, and how often is it checked for security? And that's coming from the police. The replies received from emergency services and the health and safety executive in a direct response for input as consultees are very clear. Lancashire Fire and Rescue has specifically said that the access is sufficient as it stands for our purpose, and no fire engine access to the waterside would be necessary at this stage. The other justification for the need for the ramp is that the landowner has been advised that the existing access to the water does not comply with the Control of Major Accident and Hazard Regulations, COMA. However, the consultee response from HSE in this case, as the body responsible for it, says the Quarries Regulation 1999 do not apply, and I cannot see the relevance of COMA either. The problems which result in the emergency service needing to have access have increased exponentially under the tenure of the current owner, as has been expressed by other representatives earlier. The section in Jonathan Haynes' report and accompanying picture of the fence is misleading. It shows a nice, neat new fence and gates which have been erected around the main entrance. However, the current ownership, there's been obvious deterioration on other large parts of the perimeter fence, particularly along Apley Lane North, where it is frequently breached. Repairs, when completed, are shoddy, easily undone, and don't last long. Indeed, the repair done on Monday morning following this weekend's activities lasted an hour, especially when debris is left around the area and is used as makeshift tools by those wanting to gain the access, and it's not cleared away. This means that despite the owner's claims of strong boundary, there are weaknesses that are easily exploited. This weekend, swimmers, again, as already been mentioned, have been seen bathing on the access ramp and swimming on the edge. Extending the ramp and providing more low-level access to the water would only exacerbate any current problems and encourage more swimmers to enter, as those reluctant to Tombstone at the moment would have more water level access. There's a plea to all agencies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. We have another contributor via Zoom, Kerry Elston.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to speak. Can you guys hear me okay? Hello?
Yes, we can.
Yes, great, okay. Mr. Haynes stated in his opening statements that Maybrook Developments have obtained a dewatering licence to remove 70% of the water from East Quarry with the intention to fill it with inert waste. I'd like to refer to the construction phase plan for Appley Bridge East Quarry Abstraction dated 26th of June 2020. I have shared this document with you. It was completed by a Russell Group of companies. I wish to draw your attention to the following extracts. While the abstraction of water is taking place, the clay being brought to site will already have commenced. The submission goes on, and this is what is paramount. The existing area which is being established as the tipping point area will be reinforced to ensure that no wagon making deliveries shall be put at risk from slipping down the bank towards the quarry. This clearly states that the intention for this ramp is not for the purposes of access for emergency services, but is clearly being constructed to facilitate filling the quarry with clay. Mr. Haynes mentioned there have been fatalities, 2 in the last circa 15 years. However, there has been no effort to provide any other emergency provisions in the meantime, as some of the other speakers have stated. If this ramp is granted for all emergency purposes, but is then used to facilitate the dumping of clay, who will ensure that Maybrook Investments will stick to its granted use? Mr. O'Dowd illegally pumped water for a period of 8 hours on the 1st of June 2020. He has since left a dangerous contraption in Calico Brook, despite being told a number of occasions by Wigan Council to remove it. The Russell Group report that I previously just mentioned now clearly shows the intention to use this ramp for filling the quarry, even before the water has been abstracted. So how on earth will he do that without using this new ramp? On the 23rd of January 2020, Mr. Haynes rejected a screening request for phase 1 of the quarry filling due to, and I quote, lack of information providing assessments on the impact on traffic and surrounding areas. These assessments still have not been done. Furthermore, all of the relevant consultees have not been contacted, and when Parville's application was submitted, Dalton, Wigan Council and other bodies were consulted. We know that Parville's application was approved, subsequently put on hold due to lack of supporting information. Mr. Haynes and Maybrook Investments should provide more evidence to what safety grounds they feel are in breach. Mr. Haynes has also stated that he wrote his summary recommendations 2 weeks before the deadline closed for local people to voice their opinion. How can that be correct? Upon my writing, there has been 136 objections and 13 in support. I see no evidence of a genuine safety issue being provided here today. I therefore ask that the reason stated for needing this ramp is disregarded by the Development Control Committee and the plan is committed until further information has been given. Mr. Haynes also mentioned that this will be a short-term thing. However, Maybrook Investment themselves has said it's going to take over 10 years to fill. So the information here is completely contradictory, and we need more time to understand and look at the information correctly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Next, we have Stuart Thorne. Mr. Thorne, where are you?
Application. It is not about safety, but the first stage by the applicant to attempt to obtain planning permission to fill East Quarry. In fact, the proposed ramp would make it easier for trespassers to enter the water. This application will bring about a loss of amenity value to the residents of Appley Bridge, who already have to put up with heavy goods vehicles, causing congestion and danger in accessing the Ruberoid site. Commuters using the rail station park all the way up Appley Lane North from the station to the old village hall, and this has been highlighted as a problem by both the County Council and Borough Council. This road network, as you must be aware, is totally unsuitable for any increase in traffic, let alone tipper lorries. These lorries would cause noise, dust and pollution to the residents of Appley Bridge. This area is a residential area, and if this application was granted, would cause misery to the local inhabitants. Surely you as a council have a duty of care to these residents. Finally, yet again, the planning officers failed to consult the residents of Appley Bridge on this proposal. It seems to be becoming a habit, and I believe is in breach of Article 15 of the Development Management Procedure Order. If this quarry is such a liability, then it could be donated to the Lancashire Wildlife Trust, who could access grants to maintain the existing wildlife. I therefore request the committee to reject this application forthwith.
Thank you, Mr. Thorne. Next via Zoom, we have County Councillor John Phillis. Councillor.
Good morning. Basically, in my written response, I asked the committee to reject this proposal. But since then, officers have got back to me and said, what we need to do is keep to the agenda, and that's important. This application comes under the minerals and waste planning application on our LCC website. We also look at what the consultees said, and I think it's already been stated, Fire believe they have an adequate access already. The health and safety executive said, in their opinion, it's going to be a major landfill site, but make no comment. West Lancs Borough Council appear to be dealing with it as a major landfill site as well. Our highways department says there's already access to the site. There are a number of supporting emails from police and others, and it has to be recognised that it would be a good idea that emergency vehicles could get to the actual quarry site with ease. That's important. But also, if you actually look at the design and construction, it's all down to HGV tipper trucks for landfill. As I stated previously, the committee should go on what's in front of it. The best way to do that is for the committee to go and have a look at the site. The entrance and access to the site is already there without this construction. I would also ask the committee to move a site visit, then decide for themselves, is this a temporary access? Or is this the beginning of a major landfill site? Taking into account, according to our own planners, we already have enough landfill sites in Lancashire. This site, if it's going to be developed, should be developed as a whole and not as a piecemeal act, which is chipping away at public confidence. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. And then finally, speaking for the application, we have James Shahat from Soteria UK Limited.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I've been involved in health and safety now for over 20 years, and this really is a case of safety first. Can we make this site safer? Yes, we can. Currently, the access ramp is inadequate due to its gradient, its width, not just for operatives who work there, but also for emergency services if they need access. We've heard this morning of people entering the site who shouldn't, children, young adults. They will always, no matter what mitigation we have in place, they will always find a way to get in that site. Part and parcel of having a health and safety management system in place is having appropriate emergency preparedness and response. There is actually an international standard, 45001 health and safety management, and clause 8.2 in that standard is planning for an emergency and responding to that emergency. So currently, the access ramp isn't fit for purpose, okay? It's too narrow, it's not stable after rainfall, and it is a risk. It's a risk not only for the operatives that work there, but also for emergency services if they need to tend to a foreseeable child who's jumped in the water on a hot day. Again, I would draw the analogy to an indoor building with a fire door that's obstructed or not the right width. We wouldn't let that happen in today's world, okay? If we knew that the building was prone to fire, we'd make sure that the width of that access out of the building was fit for purpose. In just the same way as this, we've had emergency services say that that access point isn't fit for purpose. So again, I would prick your conscience and think about your own children, your own grandsons, granddaughters. If they were ever in a situation where they're going to get into a quarry, they're going to, dive into water, which they shouldn't. Would you want the emergency response to be quick? Yes, you would. Okay, so I've listened to all the disapprovals and rejections of this, but it does come down to a safety issue. At present, that access ramp isn't fit for purpose. To make that site safer would need proper access.
Okay, thank you very much. I suggest we now go to, rather than there's a lot there, Jonathan, to respond to, but I suggest we take councillors' questions first and start with Councillor Patterson.
Yeah, or is it on? Yeah. Oh, thank you, Chair. Well, I really want to request to arrange a site visit. After listening to the speakers, they seem to know this area very well, and me personally better than the committee. And also, can this go to West Lancs Borough Council before it comes back to us? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pope.
Thank you. It's not often I agree with Councillor Phillips, but I would support a site visit on this particular issue. I really must comment on the last speaker's comments. Basically, you have heard all the negative reports by the people who live in the area. I go around that area quite often. It is an awful area in terms of traffic. It is not safe, and safety is the responsibility of the owners. The owners should put the appropriate safety in place to protect everybody in that area. Here, they are trying to turn it into a safety issue when basically they want to fill the quarry in. So I object to that. I think there should be much more information on this. Basically, the report from the officers on the front page, it estimates that the construction of the ramp would require approximately 11,000 square meters of inert fill materials, approximately 27 days. The maximum depth of the quarry is believed to be around 26 meters. Why don't we know that? Why haven't we got that information? So I would agree and second the motion for a site visit, but also I think this requires a lot more information for us to make any decision going forward. And also, I think councillors should see the full report from the West Lancs Borough Planning Department, rather than just have snippets of it taken out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Yates.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm completely against going for consultation yet again to West Lancashire Council with no representative whatsoever, no observations given. They have been consulted, and we've got Whittingham Parish Council, no observations again. I feel that they have let the residents down, and it's come to us as a good application to put before this committee, because after all it is mineral and waste. So on saying that, I have a few questions to ask. On the application, when it was to close the quarry, what was the condition for the security around it? And if the security, if the officer comes back and says that the security was to have effective fencing around it, security guards, signs putting up to tell people that it's dangerous water, not for swimming, or that anything else that it could go on which would help the police, is like having signs on there saying that people will be prosecuted if they go onto that land. I think that will help. Looking at these pictures on the back of our agenda, that scares me to death. And I see loads of youngsters like that. I've been young once and I've swum in quarries, I have, but we never had any fences around them, you know, and they weren't as dangerous as this one. But you could go walk straight up to them. But when I see pictures of fencing like this, that the applicants, but we've actually shown, and the residents have shown, I cannot believe that we as well, or whether it's West Lancs, have let them get away with this. This should have been enforced by the planning conditions and kept up to date. This is just disgusting to see that it's unkept. There's no signage whatsoever, and it's just been left to go through rack and ruin, and no wonder we're getting deaths in that quarry. if we haven't got adequate signing up and adequate fencing to secure the site. So completely against that. Now, moving on, that if council does decide to recommend that it goes forward for approval, could I just put in another couple of things? When I find the agenda again. So back at this. There we go. Listening to residents and their concerns, I haven't been to look at the site, so I don't know where the school is. But listening to where the location of the school without seeing it, I would say that the travel times that we've got down is not good, not good at all for residents. There is no travel plan, which we should have for that for vehicles going to that site. And I would say that 7:30 to 17:30 is adequate, but with no movements between 8:30 and 9:30, so that we don't, so there's no effect on the school. And the same in the afternoon, 3 till 3:30. I'm a bit surprised that there's no environmental permit on it. And I think we need to look at that. And when we talk about, I've heard residents talk about it's going to be an infill site. Well, we could just remind everyone that we've got to look at this application as it is in front of us, not what it could be in the future. So that's where I'm coming from. Now, I'll leave it at there. I'm not going to move anything, but I'll leave it there until we get some answers to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Yates. Councillor Hindle.
Oh, hi. Just a couple of little comments, really. I agree with a lot of what Barry said. For example, if there's been 2 deaths already, and I understand that the fencing isn't right, why on earth is there not any life buoys or anything on the site? I mean, that would be an initial thing that you could have before you even need the use of the fire engines or whatever to come on the ramp. There should be something there, shouldn't there? Even though the people shouldn't be doing it. I think that's, I can't believe there's nothing like that. And then from one of the speakers who was talking about the environment and why isn't that being up to date? Why isn't there an up-to-date report about the species that are there and the impact it could have if they did drain all the water and chop down some of the trees? Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Cullens.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think one of the things that we're missing fundamentally here, and I do have a little sympathy with the applicant with regards to the security, because in very close to where I live, there is Whittle Quarry, which has also had a fatality, and that was through a breach of fencing, similar kind of fencing that we've seen. I think one of the key issues here, and one of the non-consultees in this, is the police. You know, and really, I think we need a comment from Chief Constable or the Police and Crime Commissioner, because these are breaches of law. These children should not be in there. I think more signage is required that they are trespassing, not signage that they shouldn't be swimming, because any way that we actually make it easier for people to swim, but even by notice or by providing life-saving equipment, it will encourage more and more, and it is a breach of the law. I concur with Councillor Phillips and would also go along with the site visit. I think the issue again is the ramp will make it easier. You know, it's not very clear from this report also the fire and rescue service of a requirement. You know, the initial comment from them is they can manage adequately with what there is. So if that's the case, I think, you know, as I say, I'd take, if we can, comments from the Police and Crime Commissioner, Chief Constable, and have a site visit. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a couple of points. I think one of the frustrations with this committee, as you get planning committee on a borough level as well, is what you can and can't make decisions on. And we would love to make a decision to say we can't have future applications on this site. And like I said, is this a kind of a mission creep sort of application where they do this, it will enable them to do something later. We can't make that assessment. We are not allowed to make that assessment because, as Councillor Yates says, we have to assess it solely on just this ramp. And that is really frustrating and can be really annoying for residents. But unfortunately, our hands are tied on what we can and can't look into while on this committee. Likewise, one of the things I do worry about is the ecology reports. All right. We cannot just accept ecology reports from an applicant or in desk. They have to be fully done, because once these areas go, you don't get them back potentially. So that is something I would like to say. I know you've probably got 1,000,001 points to have to respond to here, Jonathan, but actually that is something I would like to have an answer to. The width of a track someone's mentioned. Working on construction sites previously, I do wonder if part of it, and again, you'll be able to answer this question, is that if you have a slightly wider track, it's easier to manage traffic within the site so it doesn't spill outside of a track, outside of the site. So if two heavy goods vehicles can pass each other easily, it then mitigates some of the problems of them having to turn outside the site or something like that. So I'd like a question on that. Lot to talk about enforcement. Again, that isn't a matter for this authority. Really frustrating, but it's not something we can decide on. It is down to the police. It is down to the planning authority if there's been a breach of planning, because under most planning things, you have stipulations that if you do not hit this stipulation, you will get enforcement action put against you. We are not the enforcing body in this council, so it will be down to a planning application for any future application or for previous that those stipulations are met. So I completely understand your frustrations with this application. I can understand how some councils want to get a site visit because they want to know more about it. But even if we did a site visit, we would not know as much as these guys. That is the nature of when you have a development control for such a large authority. So it's incredibly difficult. I'm waiting to hear what officers respond to all the points made, but a lot of them are not issues for this application or for this chamber, unfortunately.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Murphy.
For me, the essential principle at stake here is whether the applicant is using a sledgehammer to crack a nut, and whether resolving outstanding health and continuing health and safety issues with this site is best solved by infilling the site. That's the essential issue at stake here. And for me, the two most important consultees are Lancashire Fire and Rescue and the Health and Safety Executive. Lancashire Fire and Rescue, I'd like to see more about what they said. We've only been offered 6 lines of text here, and it's quite vague in terms of what they're suggesting. They said that they have been dealing with issues at the quarry for many years, and that they have a need for good access. Well, does good access mean an extension of this ramp? Does it mean the infilling of the quarry? I don't know. That specific question hasn't been asked. Health and Safety Executive has advised on legislative requirements. Site isn't a working quarry. Some of the regulations might not be relevant here. However, there may be a health and safety at work issue. However, there may be. Is there not? You know, we need a good understanding of that. I agree with Councillor Potter that there are many issues which stem from this, and for me, there are 3 in particular. One is the movement of massive amounts of HGV vehicles, which are going to cause absolute chaos on the road, and there isn't really sufficient detail in this application about how they're going to kind of manage that process on a narrow road, which is often blocked by people parking on one side or the other, and also how they're going to resolve the issue of the potential damage to the road that is caused by the movement of these heavy vehicles bringing spoil in, and also the route they're going to take. Obviously, the ecology is really important on this going forward, and I think there are a whole series of unresolved issues in relating to that. But for me, like the astonishing thing is, if the site is so bloody dangerous, and that's what everybody seems to be admitting, why aren't the CCTV cameras in place? Why don't the owners have permanent security staff monitoring the site and preventing ingress by people getting into the quarry? I find that absolutely astonishing. I mean, I think the Borough Council and the Health and Safety Executive have a due responsibility to take action against the quarry owners for not taking sufficient responsibility and fulfilling their obligations in relation to that. I'm not sure that a site visit would be justified, although I do take Councillor Phyllis's comments on board. For me, I just think there's insufficient information in this application, and I think it probably needs to come back with a whole lot more detail, particularly from Lancashire Fire and Rescue, particularly from the Health and Safety Commission, but also from the site owners about maybe alternative ways of resolving the health and safety and the security aspects. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Are any other comments? Yeah, no, I agree. There's a lot there for officers to be going on with about fencing, environment, police, fire, everything really. So if you could respond to some of those, I've got a full list though, in case you miss any.
Yeah, yeah, I've got quite a list too. I'm just keen to mop up before they snowball or before the list gets too long, really. If I take them in turn, I've got a query on my notes from Councillor Patterson's comments in terms of you say you want it to go to West Lancs Borough Council. Is that a reference to it going for the purposes of consultation or for the purposes of determination?
Well, both really, because I think there's a lack of communication between Lancashire County Council and these speakers here. They seem to know the area really well, and obviously West Lancs Borough Council. You know, there'll be the same councillors as are on that council as here. So I just thought maybe it goes there first and see how that gets on and then comes here, because the speakers seem to know more about the area than the committee. You know, I'm from Morecambe, I know I'm on the committee, but I don't have a clue about this area. And you know, these people live there and it's the health and safety of the residents. So that's just my opinion.
Sure. Okay. So on that basis, I mean, West Lancs have now provided a response. They didn't provide one within the statutory consultation, but they have it. It was covered within the update sheet. So so the Borough Council have commented. They provided quite a lengthy response. They've also been working with Jonathan in terms of determination, and certainly within that response from the Borough Council, the one point that is missing, which has been raised today, is this question over whether they should be determining it. West Lancashire don't say we should be determining it. They're quite content that this is coming to us. Thank you, Councillor Pat. Yeah, sorry, yeah, your move and second on the site visit still noted, yeah. Turning then to Councillor Yates, I think it's probably the same sort of point really, in terms of you were concerned about a lack of response from the Borough Council, and obviously I've just set out, they've replied. So that's okay. In terms of the historic condition on fencing, I understand that the permission expired essentially for the quarrying. So in terms of restoration, that's all been complied with, and there's no condition to require the fencing to be maintained after quarrying activity stops. Although obviously your points in terms of a travel plan and change of times and noted. Am I right in noting that you didn't move them, you were just putting them out for discussion?
Yeah, I was just putting it down to the floor for now.
Perfect, thank you. In terms of Councillor Cullens, I think you were concerned that the police hadn't commented. The police comments are page 16, the penultimate bullet points. The local policing team commented on the imperativeness of draining the water from the quarry. So their comments are included. Councillor Potter raises questions, as does Councillor Hindle, on the ecology report. So I'll pass over to Jonathan on that. And Councillor Potter also just wants some clarification on the width of the track, I think. Councillor Murphy, and obviously you identify that the fire response is perhaps short. That seemed to me to be a statement. If there is a question, that's absolutely fine. In terms of the HSE, you were concerned that the HSE say that there may be a Health and Safety at Work Act issue. I don't think it's within the HSE's gift to give to say that there is or there isn't prior to any incident having occurred. They couldn't say there is a Health and Safety at Work Act issue. They would determine that once an incident's happened. So they're simply making the applicant aware that there may be an issue that the applicant needs to consider in that context. In terms of damage to the road, you sounded concerned in terms of the HGVs travelling along the roads, and that increase in traffic along a road might damage that. I completely accept your comments, but they're public highways, so these are publicly usable vehicles used on public highways. Unless they were causing some sort of damage by overrunning curbs or something out of the ordinary, then that would just be the ordinary use of a public highway. So I think that's it from me, Chair, I think.
Thanks, Ross. And I'd probably just add on the highways, obviously there are comments from Lancashire County Council Highways Development Control, and they haven't issued an objection on this. Jonathan, over to you, I think. Thank you.
Yes, please. If I can just leave from where Ross had his last points to make, but just firstly on Councillor Yates's point about the insecurity of the site. The problems with the site, it was granted planning permission in the sort of 1940s and 50s, when obviously the controls on the site were very light compared to what they are now. So there were no controls on fencing or even restoration. So there is nothing that we can bring to bear now in terms of planning controls that would require new or higher fencing or any sort of improvement or maintenance of fencing. So that's unfortunately the case with that. You also raised the issue about the school travel times and whether or not it'd be appropriate to condition those. I think one of the issue with that, it's very hard for us to control vehicle movements to avoid school travel times. You know, if a HGV coming to the site is leaving from Chorley, say 8:30, and the site's conditioned so that the lorries can't come past the school at 9 o'clock, what happens with the vehicle when it gets sort of halfway there? Does it have to stop and wait, or it becomes very hard to control and to enforce? And for that reason, I don't think it'd be really practical to impose those kind of conditions. It would also mean that the duration of the development would carry on for longer. So, you know, if you say they can't work for certain parts of the day, it just means that the whole tipping goes on for like 6 weeks rather than 5. So there's those impacts to consider as well. In terms of the environmental permit, this ramp would use waste, so waste soils and clays, which arise from building sites and other construction operations. So normally where you're using waste, that does require a permit from the Environment Agency. But because there's lots of times when you want to use waste for construction purposes, and they're fairly small scale, and if the waste is clean, the risk from is quite low. So therefore there are systems of exemptions from the permitting, which allow you to do it with a very sort of reduced scale of regulation, and that's what the applicant's done here. He's asked for a permit exemption from the Environment Agency, which allows him to import a certain volume of clean material to build this ramp, and that's how this will be controlled in terms of the Environment Agency regulation. Just in terms of Councillor Hindle's point, she asked about the life-saving equipment. I think one of the problems with this site, it is quite large in terms of its site boundary, and there are multiple access points that people have used. So therefore, you would need to have equipment at lots of different parts of the site, and you can't easily move between different areas. So if you say you had life rafts and ropes and other equipment at one part of the site, that wouldn't necessarily help you if the accident happened at somewhere else. So given the configuration of the quarry, it is very difficult to think of how that would actually help in terms of health and safety issues. So that's the background there. You also asked about the wildlife impacts, and I'll just go on to the slide. You are quite correct in terms of the protections that exist in relation to bats and great crested newts and other protected species. They are clearly important planning considerations, and there are bats that will use this quarry because it's water. There'll be insects at night, so it's quite reasonable that the bats will use it for foraging. But what the protection that exists is in relation to bat roosts. That's a key issue, really. So if there were old trees on this site or buildings which were likely bat roosts, then yes, they would need to do a full bat survey to assess actually what the value of the trees to be removed is before you can take the planning decision. But as you can see from the picture here, the trees on this site, they're trees which have grown up since the quarry was last worked. So they're relatively young trees, and the species I don't think are ones which will normally be used for bats. You know, if they were oak trees or other trees which have lots of holes and cracks in, you know, old dead branches, then yes, certainly they will be a potential bat habitat. But the trees which I've seen on this site, I don't think of that nature. So therefore, I think we can safely take the view that the impacts on bats would be limited. I think that was the issue that Councillor Potter raised as well. So hopefully I've picked up on the points raised there.
Thank you. Councillor Yates, who's come back.
Right, thank you, Chair. I begin to look at this in two different ways. We can defer it and go for a site visit, and then that'll take two months there. So how many deaths could we have in that 2 months? Because we won't be doing anything to the fencing whatsoever. It'll just be as it is. So it's still a danger to the residents. Or we could say, well, in our view, that the applicant putting the ramp in could be possibly wasting his money, and he could be looking further, but that's not for us to look at. We could go for approval and say, right, we could put these conditions on in going for approval to safeguard the residents around there. We could put that before any work starts, that the fencing has to be secured. It has to be signage up saying that it's private land and you'll be prosecuted if you go on to it. We could put a travel plan in to make sure that the vehicles going to the site and coming back from the site travel on one route. And if it's passing the school, we can put times of stoppages in. I've worked for a massive travel business, and you can put stops in, same as you do when you run out of your time with your tachograph, you stop for a brew. Now, that's a simple thing for that. So you can do that. So we could go down the line and say, yes, we'll accept it. In our mind, you're wasting your money putting that in. But by doing so, we secure the site now. We put all the conditions in and tighten everything up so that when it is completed in 2 months' time, 4 months' time, then we haven't got this problem that we've got today. And we could also put in conditions that the ground, the level of what we're putting on, that we could say, well, this is what we want it to look like. The wildflower meadows, more trees planting, whatsoever to stop people going in. You know, we could do all that as a committee. So I'm leaving it there. I'm not going any further, but just for discussion.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Yates. Councillor Hindle and Councillor Potter.
I just wanted to come back quickly on a couple of issues. I was a little bit concerned when you said you don't think the bats are in those areas. I'm not a bat expert. I don't know if they only like oak trees. I would imagine that they don't. I think that's something that, you know, a proper survey could check. That's just my point of view. And then the other thing about the not knowing where to put the life-saving equipment, again, surely there's particular bits where people congregate to. Maybe the fire service could advise where they've been before, because I just think it's just so important. And I don't know her name, I'm sorry, but there's an amazing woman who she tirelessly campaigns about safety in water. I believe she lost her son, 13, in a reservoir in Lancashire. I'm sure she could advise, you know, there's people out there that could really make a difference, I think. That's my point of view.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, some of the councillors have got me more confused after they spoke than actually from before they started. So firstly, Councillor Patterson, you can't ask West Lancs for consultation and then ask them to make a determination of the site. Yeah, it has come to us and we've seen it in the report. We have to determine it, and they came in late with the consultation. So you can't, yeah, no, but I'm saying is you can't push the decision on them, because it's quite right. The one thing they're not asking for is for them to make the decision of it, probably because it's quite controversial. However, I wasn't exactly happy with the response on the ecology reports either. Assumptions and I thinks are not good enough, and does kind of highlight one of the concerns from the Borough Council that an ecology report hasn't been fully done and there is insufficient evidence. Again, talking on safety, and through you, Chair, if you could facilitate this, very important. Whose responsibility is it for securing that site? It will be the applicant. Whose responsibility is it for checking that security is good enough? I don't think it's this committee. And if you could explain that, because you can debate it all you want, Barry. You could say, we want to come in and we want to make sure there's this fence, this whatever. If that's not for us to decide, then it's a moot point. It's for some other authority to decide. So through you, Chair, I would love to get a definitive answer on that. And lastly, I want to answer on, if we do defer this to get more information, because I would like more information based on particularly ecology, do we have any timeframes we have to hit this by, any legal timeframes that we have to make a decision by? Again, those are really important questions, Chair. If you could facilitate answers, I'd appreciate.
Thank you. Jonathan.
There's no time frame as such. I mean, obviously the applicant wants to do his work as soon as possible, but of course we've got to make sure our decision is ticks all the boxes in terms of has the relevant information. In terms of if you were concerned about a lack of bat information, we are in the right time of year now to do a bat survey. It's not quite as simple as that, because it would be very given the nature of the site, it would be very difficult to know whether or not there's actually bats using those trees. You could probably find that there's bats using the quarry, but that doesn't mean that bats are using those trees. Yeah, well, I mean, given the scale of the scheme, I don't think it's appropriate to ask them to do a full biodiversity survey. You've got to look at it in terms of what's being applied for and what the impacts are. So things like great crested newts, I would be very surprised if there are GCNs using this quarry. I appreciate that someone's sent in a picture of one, but that doesn't mean to say they're in that site and was it even a great crested newt. So there's a whole host of issues there. But yeah, that's the issues we've got to consider, really.
Could you respond on the issue again of fencing and conditions, and also the suggestion that might be something we could do with the travel plan conditions, the timings of vehicles?
Do you mind if I pick that up, Chair? Just in terms of, I think there's a number of potential proposals for conditions in terms of fencing, signage, the traffic plan, landscaping, and potentially life-saving equipment as well. The crux of this is to determine, I mean, what I don't want to do is teach the committee to suck eggs. They know the basis on which conditions can be implied. This is a proposal for a ramp. It's the construction of a ramp using inert waste material. The reason for that proposed development is to drain water, not completely, to 70%. And so you have to consider whether those proposed conditions might satisfy the tests as conditions. Would they be relevant to the development, given that the development is a proposed access track? My advice to committee would be that certainly life-saving equipment isn't relevant to a development. notwithstanding that I absolutely accept the issues and the concerns of the residents in terms of the safety of these young people. I think that the intention really is that by draining the water, you essentially take away the attractiveness, or certainly reduce the attractiveness of the site, such that if there's fewer people there, the risk reduces. In terms of fencing, again, is it proportionate to require fencing when we're proposing an access track, signage, traffic management plans? I think that certainly in terms of the fencing, the signage, there's not a justification for that. I mean, this development as a development is very small scale, and so would it satisfy the tests? Is it reasonable? Is it necessary? On paper, you know, the construction of an access track, it's not necessary to have life-saving devices conditioned, but principally because the life-saving devices aren't there as a result of the construction of the access track. They're there as a result of the trespass, which is an entirely separate issue. So I hope that helps, Chair.
It does, yes, thank you. And I do think we have to question how proportionate some of the proposals are, no matter how much we might like them. Look, I think we're probably moving to Councillor Pope.
Yeah, just coming back to the ecological issues. Basically, Jacobs said that they should be revisited. An extended phase 1 habitat survey should be undertaken. A bat activity survey should be undertaken. Impacts upon hedgehogs, nesting birds, badgers, and great crested newts, red squirrels and reptiles should be considered and mitigated if necessary. This needs proper looking at. I mean, to hear an officer say he doesn't think, you know, there'll be an issue in terms of great crested newts, I don't think it's good enough. We need the proper surveys. The others are out of date.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Yates.
Yeah, check all the comments coming back. So if we couldn't secure the site just because it's a ramp, I think that the ramp, putting a ramp in, will make the site more unsecure. So I would be going against the application, and I'd move that the application is refused and until if it comes back with the full complement of reasons why it should be there about everything else that's been mentioned today. But I think it's an outright refusal on safety grounds.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Well, there's two separate things that we mentioned. One is about a site visit that Councillor Patterson proposed and that Councillor Pope seconded. I don't know, we'll just take some advice here. Would this something we could take to a vote if we wanted to consider a site visit, appreciating the time and obviously cost to the public purse as well that we need to factor in?
Sure, Chair. So, I mean, if you're satisfied that committee have debated the issue, then we can certainly move to vote. What I would say, Chair, before going to the vote on the possibility of a site visit, I think it's just important to stress that you know, site visits are the exception rather than the rule, and then there must be an expectation of a substantial benefit to be gained from having that site visit. So when members are voting on whether they'd like to conduct a site visit or not, that's the test that they should be having in mind. Is there an expectation of a substantial benefit? But in terms of order of decision, then yes, we would take the site visit motion first.
Councillor Pope.
Chair, in view of the proposal that has come in to actually refuse, and that's been seconded, I will withdraw my seconding of the site visit. And I will
okay, thank you.
Support refusal of the application.
Okay, Councillor Patterson, you want to withdraw your... Councillor Potter.
Just to add to Councillor Yates's proposal, with his blessing, of course. So one of the issues you've just heard that the officers, you know, to refuse it solely on safety grounds because it's just a ramp isn't particularly a strong argument. I would say, Barry, you should add into it the lack of information on ecology as well. I mean, it's up to you. It's your proposal. You've just done it, but you didn't say actually we wanted to those reports in. I would suggest you amend that to say, look, we want a proper ecology ecological reports to be in before we can go forward. And that's a reason for refusal, because we want to try and have as many of the valid reasons for refusals as possible in our determination. But that's up to you.
Councillor Yates.
Yeah, I'll accept that. But just put with the lack of the information. Because you can't say we want it in, you have to say it's not there, there's a lack of it. Okay, is that all right?
Okay, thank you. Just so it seems to me that the motion is to refuse, proposed by Councillor Yates, seconded by Councillor Murphy. But I just want to check on the right procedure here.
Yep, so you're certainly right, that is the proposal. I just wanted to sort of check and clarify in terms of the reasons for a refusal, if committee do vote that way. I would propose that we maybe bring it back, or that we have a short adjournment to discuss the basis for refusal.
Yeah, yes, happy to do that.
But if you're happy, Chair, I'm happy to move to the vote.
Yes, I'm happy with that. I think the committee is as well.
So in which case, committee, we're voting for the refusal of this application. That was a movement that was brought forward by Councillor Yates and was seconded by Councillor Murphy. If you could show by way of raised hand, whether you are for the motion, i.e. whether you are for refusal.
Just keep your hands up for a bit to make sure we've counted this all, although it's unanimous.
And whether you're against. And abstained. That's carried, Chair. So the application is refused.
Thank you very much. Those who came to speak on this, if they wish to stay for the remainder of the meeting, they'd be most welcome, but I appreciate they might want to leave at this time. So in which case, thank you for your time.
Thank you from Zoom.
Very much.
Councillors, the suggestion is that we adjourn at this point. The public would be asked to leave, but they are doing so anyway. So thank you. But we'd also cut off the Zoom feed at that time. And this is to discuss our reasons for refusal of item 5. We're all happy with that? Okay, thank you. The meeting's adjourned. I'm just wondering, hello, Councillor Patterson. I want to be clear when we're back online. And there may not be so many people watching us anymore, but that seems a sensible idea. Councillor Potter, go on, go on. Can I also suggest, before we reconvene, very much indeed. I'm just going to confirm, perhaps with a, can I confirm that we're back online? I think we must be. Thank you very much indeed. Just to go back to item 5, which we refused. The basis for refusal is on amenity, public amenity. What will happen is that the full reasons for refusal will be worked up. Obviously, they will be on the decision notice. They'll also be in the minutes, obviously, of this meeting for the next meeting, but they will be worked up. So I hope we're all content with that. Yep, great. Thank you all very much. And thank you for a very thorough and thoughtful debate on that, I thought. Takes us on to item 6, which is Pendle Borough, application LCC 2021-17. It's the construction of 3 buildings and 3 kiosks at Burnley Wastewater Treatment Works off Barden Lane, Wood End Road in Burnley. Jonathan, if you could present this.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and make this one fairly short because it is reasonably straightforward. Famous last words. So this is the application site. So it's quite a large scale treatment works that deals with wastewater from Burnley area. And what they're applying for here is six buildings which are linked with a much larger scale scheme for the improvement of the works. And those improvement works are designed to, firstly, to improve the overall capacity of the works, given the increase in population catchment, and also to meet various higher water quality standards in the discharge, and therefore the works or the operator does need to do a lot of improvements on this work to improve the size and range of treatment equipment on the site. So you can see there the air photograph showing the various treatment tanks on the site now and other bits of treatment infrastructure, and the areas as red are where there will be 3 buildings. So you'll see from the first page of the report that some of these buildings are quite large, and the site's in the green belt, but we do consider that given the imperative behind this scheme, there are very special circumstances justified in relation to the buildings in the green belt. The other issue that's brought before you is the objections which have been received from the parish council and also from various local residents who are concerned about traffic issues and other environmental issues. But as is set out in the report, the major works on this site are done under the applicant's PD rights. They don't need planning permission for those works. So therefore, the only thing that's before you this morning or this afternoon now is just the 6 buildings, and the impacts of the wider development aren't really for you to consider. And we are imposing a condition on landscaping, which I'll show you, which is the area edged green in that area there, and that's to ensure that the impacts of the buildings are screened from the adjacent residential properties, and to provide some additional mitigation for the impacts of the works in the wider sense. So with those conditions, we do think that planning permission should be granted. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Do we have any questions from committee members? Yes, absolutely. Do you have a second? Councillor Yates. Well, look, I think if there are no particular comments, thank you, Jonathan, for your background. Oh, Councillor Potter, I do beg your pardon. Carry on.
Paul got in there so quickly, I didn't get a chance to ask me my question. one thing, when you talk about mitigation measures to do obviously with the new trees that are planted, is the rule on that they should, obviously they don't want to plant saplings because that take 30 years to obviously do the mitigation we're talking about. What kind of, when you have that sort of mitigation measures put in, what kind of spread are we hoping for from the trees?
Yeah, right. So you'll see that condition 4 in the report deals with the landscaping, and there is quite a comprehensive plan that the applicants set out showing the landscaping works. Some of that is in terms of bunding, because on the site they'll be digging various tanks and underground infrastructure which will generate inert waste materials. So rather than exporting those materials, they will use that to create mounds around in the area edge green there, and on the mound they will do various tree and shrub planting works. Some of those might well involve planting saplings, because over time it's normally shown that they do better than planting larger trees. So there'll be a management period to ensure those trees do reach maturity and do contribute towards landscaping and other more general environmental mitigation.
Satisfied. Lovely, thank you. Okay, in that case, the motion is to approve, proposed by Councillor Rigby, seconded by Councillor Yates. Ross, over to you.
Yep, you're absolutely right, Chair. This is moving for approval. You've correctly identified who was pressing forward. If you could show by way of raised hand whether you're for, against, or abstain. So if we're for, yep, sorry, here we go. That's unanimous, I think. Thank you, Chair. That's carried unanimously.
Thank you very much. Very efficient. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item number 7, which is West Lancashire Borough. Application number LCC 2021-0022. It's the formation of a multi-use games area. This is West Lancashire Community High School, School Lane, Chapel House, Skelmersdale. Jonathan.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this is for a games area on a school site. The playing fields at this site are used by 3 different schools. So they wish to improve their sports provision by, rather than using the playing field, which does suffer from poor drainage and other sort of factors which affect its usability. They are proposing a surface games area which could be used for a variety of different sports, which would also be open for local community to use outside of school hours. So you'll see from the report that Sport England did raise objection to this because they were concerned about the loss of the grass playing pitch. But on the update sheet, Sport England have now withdrawn their objection because they do consider that there are benefits of this proposal in terms of sport and recreation, and therefore it's considered that planning permission should be granted along with the conditions set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or observations? Councillor Cullens.
Thank you very much, Chair. 2 issues really. Just one in respect of the difficulty often with these multi-games areas is the noise coming from people using that facility. And I'm just wondering if there's any mitigation can actually be by way of shielding or camouflaging at each end of the games area, which would deflect any noise away from local residential areas. And I have a question regarding the working programme 4, which talks about the hours. Now, this is going to be used by the local community as well as the school. And I'm just wondering, was it as a request of the applicant to remove Sundays from that? And if not, if it is something that's going to be used by the school for limited hours, could I suggest that Sundays be included, and it's up to the applicant to decide then whether they wish to use that day or not? Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Okay, on firstly on the issue about noise, this would have fencing surrounding it, so that would obviously contain the use of the site, but obviously you might get balls that would hit the fence and that could generate noise by itself. But we do think that given the distance between the games area and the nearest properties, it is quite a substantial distance. So we do think that noise issues wouldn't be too much of an issue, given that already the playing field can be used by the local community. In terms of condition 4, those were the hours that the school asked for. So we're just reflecting what they requested. And you will see also that on the update sheet, Sport England have also, they've asked for the conditions which relates to use by the community, and they're asking for a scheme to be submitted to deal with that, how the site's accessed and controlled, and that also includes details of hours of use and how the school would control access to the site outside of school hours. So that would, I think, should hope to prevent unauthorised use at times when residents might find it disturbing.
Councillor Collins.
Thank you very much. And as far as part 2 is concerned, I'm happy with that if that's the timing that the school have asked for. Living quite close to a very large multi-games area at Clayton Green, one of the issues is not the ball hitting the fence, I can assure you, it's the language of people who are actually playing the games. And I just think if anything can be considered to mitigate that, then it can be only a benefit to the local residents.
Yes, and it might be optimistic that, I think, but is there anything that could be considered?
It's not really a issue that can be controlled by planning law, really. It's a matter of the government, I think, rather than planning.
Fair enough. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very pleased with this sort of application because I'm actually believe that these sports facilities at the schools are actually essential. And I think these actual community use idea is absolutely brilliant. In the area where I am, we have a school which is as a community use, and it is used on a regular basis by loads of outside organisations. And it's put a lot of children off the streets at night and they're under control. I think this is an absolute brilliant scheme, and I would actually go for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Potter.
One curious thing, again, I previously used to live next to a multi-game site at the former Tulketh High School site. And yeah, the thing you get most complaints about is bad language. You know, that's what you get. And no amount of screening is going to do anything about it. It's just because that will carry. The one bit that I just want to raise an issue with potentially going forward is that it says right at the start of this piece that there is no floodlighting facilities proposed as part of this development, yet the opening hours are going on till 8 at night, which means for half the year it's not going to be usable. So, and that was a big issue on another school site in Preston where they tried, well, later on, they started off with a multi-use games area and then later on tried to get floodlighting on it, which was then vehemently opposed by local residents. And again, a bit like the previous one, we can only deal with what's in front of us. But I am very concerned that they are, again, they've started with this, wanting to go to 8. They're not going to get people using it to 8. You know, that's just not going to happen. So we've just got to be very careful that they don't try and get around floodlighting issues later on, because looking at these times, they're going to need them.
Thank you, Jonathan. You give some reassurance on that one. Although I have to say, I've never seen times done on a seasonal basis for these sorts of things, which is effectively the reasonable point you're making. Jonathan.
I mean, the point you make is a fair one, but I think obviously the school wished to maximise the usage of the site during the summer when they could use the site up until 8 without floodlighting. And I think on this site, floodlighting would cause some issues for residents because you've got issues of glare and other disturbance, and that's why we've imposed the commission on floodlighting to give us that control in future.
Thank you. Councillor Yates.
Right, thank you, Chair. Find myself once again completely agreeing with Councillor Clark, and I'd like to second the application.
Lovely, thank you. Has anyone got any other comments? No, if not, then we have the proposers, Councillor Clark, seconders, Councillor Yates. Ross, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, so this is a vote to go with the officer's recommendation to approve, subject to the update sheet, which proposes to insert condition 8 and 9 as well as additional conditions. If you could indicate by raise of hands whether you are for this proposal. That's unanimous again, Chair, so that's carried. The recommendation is approved.
Lovely, thank you very much, Ross, and thank you all. Moving on to item 8, that's delegated decisions. This is just for the committee to note, and this is any noted by Councillor Rigby, seconded by Councillor Yates. Do we do that on the nod? I think we do that on the nod. Thank you very much. Item 9, urgent business. There are no items of urgent business. And item 10, date of next meeting is Wednesday, 8th of September. Josh, suggested earlier, it might still be in here, and obviously we'll have to depend how things are going on the plague front. But in the meantime, have a lovely summer. Thank you all very, very much.